All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today, we are finally getting back to our reread through of Wheel of Time, and we're going to be starting on the Fires of Heaven, finally. Big honkin' book. As we talked about last time, it's one that's grown on us with rereads. For me, it was in large part my first read through. I was annoyed because there's no Perrin in here. And after Dragon Reborn and Shadow Rising, he'd become my favorite character, and he has a big epic arc, and then he disappears. And for good reason, as Jordan explained more than once in Q&As, that he wasn't doing anything interesting. the the world plot was not revolving around him at the moment. He was just, being an administrator basically. But it is rather jarring, which is actually one of the first thoughts I had in getting ready for this is actually going to kind of skip to the second half of the prologue real quick. This is something that I don't like about Jordan's style is so often the prologue is a teaser. It's a teaser trailer for things to come. And it doesn't tie into what just happened, and it doesn't even tie into what's about to happen. It ties into something that's going to happen in the next book or the book after that. Right? I think Crossroads of Twilight is the most infamous one for this, which I won't say anything more for anyone who hasn't read it yet. But I like that the second half of the prologue is Lanfear. Now it's not from Lanfear's perspective though, so we get an inside look at another one of the Forsaken, Rahvin.
Mm-hmm.
And
who according to this was super powerful.
Yeah.
And in fact, we might get to it in spoilers. I think it's one of the failings of Jordan of how he used him in this book because of what I know about him from reading this. That it was like, well, okay, that makes me wonder why he did things the way he did. But again, that's human nature. Why does anybody do something that doesn't play to their strengths just because they like it?
Yeah. Well, you get that because Grendel is here, and she is now we know, especially later from more interactions with her, that she's not the bimbo, frankly, that she appears to be on the outside. She's much more cunning than that. But at the same time, she still is distracted by physical pleasure and beauty and aesthetics. That is what consumes her. That's kind of her seven deadly sin, if you will, which most of the Forsaken seem to embody one or another. But I like that.
She's the Bill Clinton of the books.
All right.
Did you see that part of that movie when the president's wife dies? That was my favorite part.
We miss you, Phil.
That wasn't Phil. That was
I thought that was Phil Hartman.
That was Daryl Hammond. That was
Daryl Hammond.
Yeah.
That's right. Phil Hartman and Reagan, I think. Anyway, get me sidetracked with classic SNL back when it was funny. I like that this prologue connects better with what has happened and what's about to happen. Because we're going to get a lot more of the White Tower schism in this book that we kind of got teased with last time, where we left off with Sawan.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that it's going to be, you can just guess it's going to be integral to the girls' storylines because they're so connected to the tower. And it's also then connected to Rand, the main story. So even these kind of side stories are still connected. They're still strongly connected to the main story. So you don't feel like it's filler.
Mhm.
But with Lanfear specifically, we just left off with her in the climax to the last book.
Giggity.
Yeah, that with her confrontation with Rand and Asmodine and all of that, and she gives us some stuff there where she says what she's going to do, and then Jordan actually shows her doing it, which I think is great. And again, part of the point of this whole reread is to show why the books work and how the series is garbage, and not just Woke of Time on Prime, but lots of modern crap. One of the major failings is they don't have setup and payoff, and you get both in this prologue. You're getting some payoff from things that have happened, but while he's paying off some things that has happened, he's setting up further things, because you get this point of view from Rahvin, and he's thinking and he's scheming, and he's told you about how the Forsaken, one of the reasons the light won, or if the light didn't win, at least the dark lost, is because the Forsaken spent as much time against each other as they did fighting the light. And you see that directly here from Rahvin's point of view, as he's scheming and thinking of, okay, Lanfear, I'll play along. That's awesome. That's awesome. But going back to the beginning,
Well,
we
by the way,
start.
the two books I have up are because we start with Elaida. So 48
Yep.
Laws of Power, which is all about Machiavellianism and how to gain power, and the Gulag Archipelago, because that's how she rolls.
Right.
In fact,
Well,
she's actually more Maoist because she relies on shame a
yes,
lot.
shame and bullying. And then the book over your left shoulder, then the Machiavelli, is someone else. That, because that's what's her bucket?
Oh,
Is that a brain fart? The white
the
that she
person pulling her.
conspired with.
Yeah,
Alviarin.
yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know if he did this on purpose, but I've said before in our more political ones that one of the guys I listen to more frequently these days is Steve Deese, and he's been saying something that I think needs to be on t-shirts and bumper stickers everywhere, because it's very applicable to the times in which we live. And it's demonstrated here in this first half of the prologue, and then even more as we go and see what Elaida does. So we have the saying, people like to say we're a nation of laws, not men. Well, Deese has been saying, no, we are not a nation of laws, and we never have been. We're a nation of political will, and we always will be. It's really interesting to see this interaction here, because when Elaida snaps at them, they're shocked. Like, what? I didn't expect you to do that. You can't do that. And yet, she's able to bulldoze over them, because despite the fact they're shocked and indignant, they don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this over and over with her. This is how she's able to be a bully. This is how she's able to shame and bulldoze and force her way, which is really funny, because that is a primary reason Swan was pulled down. And we're told that, again, set up and payoff, we're told that early on, that more and more sisters and sitters especially are getting tired of the way Siwan just bullies and bulldozes, and she doesn't really lead, she demands. Well, and in their conspiring to get rid of her, they put up someone who's like that, only cranked up to 11.
Mm-hmm. It's the pendulum swing is what it is.
Yeah.
Well, Sawan was that way, and I'm going to put thoughts in people's heads here that aren't explicitly in the books. But Swan was that way because they had a mission that they couldn't tell anybody about.
Yes.
So it was do this, and it's like the parent. The kid says why, and you say, just do as I say. You'll understand later.
Mhm.
And whereas Elaida is that way because that's the way she is.
Mm.
Because listen to me or else you're disrespecting me. You're not acknowledging my authority. So they were the same, but for completely different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like
Um,
communists and fascists. They're the same, but for completely different reasons.
I'd forgotten there was a third part to this prologue. Because then it switches to Fane's point of view.
Uh,
As he comes in and we see he has ingratiated himself into the tower and wormed his way into Elaida's confidence and has been now poisoning her mind in the way that I brain farted. What's the other entity there? Mordrith, right?
More death.
More death from Shadar Logoth, who's
Yeah.
I think I said worming, and I don't know if I've ever realized how inspired by wormwood
Mm-hmm.
more death
Worm
must
tongue.
have been. Worm tongue
Yeah.
must have been.
Wormwood is what's in absinthe.
Yeah, well, maybe I had my mind somewhere else. But but that's another connection there because we don't get Perrin, but now we see that Fane has quick timed it to the White Tower since we last saw him. Which also gives you an idea of the amount of time that must have passed between the books. Because even if he's booking it, at a dangerous level of speed, it's gonna take him a while to get there.
But you can't just put some white letters on the bottom of the screen that says 3 months later. According to the show, it takes 3 months to go that far. So
I don't care. All right. Um and we're getting more setup here, and we already know from the Great Hunt we're getting more setup in the payoff because we saw in the Great Hunt just how much Fane / Mordeth hates Rand now and blames him for all of the serious trauma that he had to go through. And we see even more of that here. It's continuing along the same lines of what he was able to do with Pedro Nial, and poison his mind against Rand. But again, it's like he's I think it's important to consider that it's not like he's using compulsion on them. This is like hypnosis. You can't really hypnotize someone into doing something they wouldn't do anyway. It's the power of suggestion. You're not, rewiring their brain to compel them to do something. No, these are people who are already predisposed to the message that he's going to lay out. He's just laying it on really thick. So we're going to get more setup there for things to come, knowing that Elaida is going to have to deal with Rand because she's Amarillan now.
Mm-hmm. Which almost makes you wonder, kind of hindsight, if Ishamael, in his craze from touching the surface this whole time, kind of jumped the gun because he was the master at finding what people wanted. And had he taken his time a little bit more, seeing what these others are doing in his stead now that he's gone, you're like, he could have ruled the world easy.
Mm-hmm.
But he was mad from touching the world for 3,000 years. But
yeah, I mean, and we do get even more of that later as we explore that. But that is another thing the prologue offered us is even the Forsaken, he was more than half mad and less than half human. I think it was Samuel who said that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you have any other thoughts on the prologue?
Uh, no, not really. It was, yeah, we touched on the things I had already planned to bring up, so you already brought them up.
And then we get into, I'm not sure how far we'll make it, but there's a lot of stuff that happens that I don't necessarily feel the need to dwell on too much, because it's a lot of action and advancing the plot. Again, I like that. So we don't pick up immediately with Rand, even though that's where we left off, but we did kind of leave on a bit of a cliffhanger with Swan and her group. And so now we get a perspective from Min and see what's going on there and how they're handling this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get, so this is where I kind of disagree with the people who complained that there are too many characters. In that, so we're kind of getting introduced to another one here, but it's one we've already met. And we've already met directly and heard about a number of times. And now with Gareth, we're just getting more of him, where he's fleshing out that character more, and giving us a point of view. Where I think he kind of fails a little bit later in the books is when he starts giving us points of view of things that are suddenly kind of important, and it's someone we're just now meeting. It's like, you didn't even reference this person earlier. It's like, we've never heard of this person before. Gareth, we've heard of before. There's one in particular that happens way later in the books, in one of the prologues, where you get a very important point of view from him, but it's someone we've heard about numerous times throughout the books. So we at least kind of know who he is and what other people think of him, so that when he actually becomes a more important character on screen, it works. But there are going to be some times here where we're just thrown in with a character and it's like, who the heck is this?
This part I kind of liked, in that we're getting an insight into what it's like to be stilled.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, and you get kind of get a different perspectives from coping, because Leonade does it quite a bit different than Swan does.
Mm-hmm.
And Logain does it quite a bit different than both of them.
Yes.
In fact, he needs the pep talks, whereas they kind of find their own internal compass almost. But then again, that's not necessarily a fair comparison, because he's been gentled a lot longer than they've been stilled.
Yeah.
With some of the timelines that we kind of lose because of the events of the book. But
then we get another perspective at the end of the chapter. But we've met High Lady Altima before, and we know a little bit about her and what she's after. And we've met Morghese before, and then we immediately see that there's something sketchy going on here. Oh wait, no, we already know this. We already know that Gabriel is a very bad man. From Matt's point of view. In
Dragon Reborn.
Dragon Reborn, yeah. When Matt goes off with his letter. So now you're getting a strong hint that there's something else very particular going on with Gabriel here. He's more than just a bad man. as he does some funky things here, and Morghese acts oddly. And it's all kind of woven in with the prologue and the first one. I really feel like the prologue and that first chapter all kind of weave together, and he's kind of like, sprinkling breadcrumbs along the way, dropping hints and whatnot along the way. Okay, now as we get to the next couple of chapters here, I do have something of a complaint in that
You saying going into them or in the next couple chapters?
in the next couple of chapters,
Okay.
from how Rand is acting and what his personality is now compared to what it was. We see the beginnings of tyrannical Rand. And you can, especially if you sit and think about it, you can understand how Rand got here, but I don't think Jordan did an especially good job of showing. I think this is one of the rare instances where he kind of tells us more than shows us, because a lot of where Rand's frustration comes from that leads him into becoming rather tyrannical is because of the way the High Lords acted and what he had to do to get them to do what he wanted them to do and how sketchy and skeevy they were. But that was all in a couple of pages of summary that basically encompassed like 3 or 4 weeks, right? At the beginning of the Shadow Rising there, before the 3 storylines split off. So he kind of told us what was happening to Rand and what was going on with Rand there rather than showing us. And then when he finally gets into this position of power where he's accepted as the Karakarn, he's kind of an a-hole.
This is where I might have to play some devil's advocate, because you have to kind of take the perspective that has been built for us through the first 4 books, which were awesome. Now, I think where you're coming from is easy to reach that conclusion because in the first, this much of this book, everything is just kind of thrown back at you. It's like, okay, here's where we're at, and this is what everything is going on, which is probably one of the reasons it wasn't one of my favorites. Scott says it's because it's on the heels of book 4, which is, it's just so good that the next thing to come after is probably not going to live up
3
to it.
and 4, which I think are kind of by consensus, 1 and 2 for most fans.
Yeah, but that's where some maturity in reading it kind of comes in too, because if we kind of take into account those first 4 books, how many times has this 18 to probably close to 20-year-old young man been almost killed, been starving, been lied to, been not from a female perspective, but from a cohort perspective, cheated on, manipulated, and realistically, he also has the understanding that this has happened on the highest level. He's dealing with land fear. This isn't, your buddy swindling you out of $20. This is someone who's considered one of the baddest baddies for the last 3,000 years. Oh, by the way, she's in your life. That's number 1. By the way, you've almost died by her and for her several times. And she's trying to pull your strings and you know it. And you have one of the other most dangerous people of the last 3,000 years sitting in your room playing a harp. and by the way, who almost killed you.
Mhm.
And this is just maybe sheer weeks out of almost dying to Ishamael and Bilal
Well,
and Semael.
and
And
that's what I mean by you have to sit and think about it, because there's a little bit of a gap there, because if you do sit and think about it, and we pointed this out, and this is why I made sure to point this out when we were going through the Dragon Reborn, and you don't see very much of Rand, but when you see him, you recognize this is a guy who's on the edge. He's cracking because he's going through some serious trauma. And so Jordan does do a very good job of showing, when he shows Rand, he shows not just what his state of mind is, but why it's like that. That, here you have this farmer who that's all he ever wanted to be. He's not like Matt, who, is kind of enamored by adventure. He doesn't want to be, tied down. He wants to be able to wander and do his own thing, but he's not that. Rand was perfectly fine to do what he was supposed to do and grow up in his little village. And now not only has he been thrust out of it, but he's been thrust into this vitally important position. And because he is so vitally important, it's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, incredibly dangerous would be slight understatement there. But at the same time, so let's look at also the different cultures. He just went from the second most conniving leadership society to Jeto in a matter of days. First of all, Jeto is so foreign to anybody that would be on that western end of the spine that just getting used to it in general would take a long time. But you go from, again, I say the second most because the Car High North probably the worst, which he was also exposed to.
Yeah.
And burned by to some degree. And so he goes from one to the other. Your first response isn't going to be like, oh, this is a breath of fresh air. Your first response is, this is a tactic. This is to try to get me to trust them, so I lay down my guard.
Well, and on top of that, you have the disappointment of he basically said before everything split off, why a big reason why he was doing this, why he was going to the waste when Moraine wanted him to had a completely different plan for him, was to solidify not just a nation, but the clans are all basically a nation in and of themselves. So a group of nations behind him without having to conquer or cajole or whatever. He thought it was going to be, behold, here I am, and everyone bows down. And now he's found out, well, the Shido for sure are set against me and are going to fight me. And because I've kind of broken the clans, there are others that are going to them because they can't accept what I've revealed. And then you have this other group over here that hasn't revealed their intentions yet because they weren't there when I revealed myself. So now this perfect plan that he had in his head is now falling apart.
Well, not only that, so now we're talking about trust, right? So take everything I just said about going from this conniving society to one based on trust. And the reason all of that happened was because of a big lie with Couladin. So this big giant lie, which he knows, all the clan chiefs that went to Rydian know, but nobody else does. And everybody's just scattering to who they think is the proper person. Those that were at the bowl, most of them stayed with Rand. Those that are out on the outskirts are wondering what the fuck happened. And the Shido are staying with Couladin, obviously. And so now we've got a lot of conflicting things. So there's the big lie. Rand knows it. And he's expected to trust all these people, even though one of them that supposedly follows that system just had the big lie.
Mhm.
And the fact that the people who are on the outside that didn't see it happen for themselves are more inclined to trust the person that runs under their system.
Yeah.
Versus the newcomer who they weren't there to witness the fact that he was the one telling the truth. And
Well,
so
then add on top of that, Rand knows and could prove how could dispel the big lie, because look, Couladin's dragons are counterfeit. He got them from Asmodee. Here he is, except I can't do that because I need him. Because in the big picture, in the long run, I need him because I have got to learn so that I can stand on my own 2 feet against the rest of the Forsaken. And so he has to,
so he's harboring his own lie,
bite his tongue and be complicit in this big lie that is wrecking his plan. But then you add on top of that, Moiraine and Egwene, and I do think part of me thinks it's a little out of character, but part of me thinks it's perfectly understandable how and why he butts heads so much with Egwene when she should be someone who can kind of break through and kind of break his blinders and biases a little bit. But instead he sees her as an outsider already. So like page 96. So he kind of loses his temper with Moiraine and Egwene kind of needling him, and blurts out what his plan is. That about leading the clans over the spine of the world, and by the time the nations even think of uniting, it will be too late. They'll accept my peace or I'll be buried in the Can Breet, which is an amusing little bit there when Asmodee recognizes some loose Theranness there.
Well, when this is a point I wanted to bring up, but I wanted to see where you were going with this, but it might be the right place now. This is where Jordan could have done a little better in he's actually trying to show, but he doesn't show enough. Is a lot of this temper, a lot of this arrogance is the bubble of Lews Therin coming up.
That's a good point.
You see it more in the later books, especially after book 6. It really becomes clear, and you see a lot of interjection in this is why you're this way kind of thing. But here it's almost too soon, where he's trying to show you. But I think he went too far with Rand's character too fast, where he didn't show enough before it got to this point. So I think that's where your frustration lies, because you do see a lot of Lanfear, a lot of the other Forsaken talking about Lews Therin's temper going forward, but we haven't really seen it yet. It's not really a spoiler to say that, but it's important here because he has a moment where Lews Therin comes through, because Rand al'Thor has no idea what Can Breet is, and that's why
Lanfear also comments a couple of times already to this point on his arrogance. That so Lews Therin was confident to the point of arrogance, and again, that's going to happen with someone in that, on the very tail of the bell curve. That's going to happen. So he was so accomplished that it led to arrogance which led to his, downfall ultimately. We also know that he had a temper.
Well, and there's a reality that I think Jordan gets because of his military background, because of his real world knowledge, because of his historical knowledge, but it doesn't come through in a fantasy novel very well. Just because you're trying to save the world doesn't mean you're a good person.
Hmm.
And you see a lot of that in Lews Therin, where he had a shit ton of character flaws, but he thought he could save the world. If I'm the most raving narcissist in the entire world, and I know there's this existential force that's going to destroy the world, well, I still live in this world. I'm going to do everything I can to stop that. I'm just going to make it all about me. And that is something that I think people don't get reading fantasy novels. We want to think of the Frodo who's just trying to live their life and carries a ring, right?
So here's a thought that I hadn't really considered before, and if it's ever brought up in the books, I can't recall. And this does seem like a missed opportunity on Jordan's part, is that one of the comments as he starts to become this, more angry, tyrannical leader, Egwene and Nynaeve comment on how he was always such a sweet and kind boy. But he is still Lews Therin. I mean, he is still that same soul reborn. So that is still part of him. So how much of what we see of Rand is new or is influenced by that breakdown from his previous life and the maturity of Lews Therin? And how much is it just that Rand never had to lose his temper? I mean, he grew up in a very pastoral, idyllic setting.
Let's put this in my witchcraft wheelhouse. Let's look at past lives as our genetics, right? So what's passed from generation to generation to generation ultimately becomes us. There is a program there, but that program is filled with if-then statements. If this happens, then I change in this direction. If you're born with the MOA alpha gene, you are more prone to be extremely aggressive as an adolescent and young adult male. If and only if you were abused as a child, right? He was not abused as a child, but he, in the course of these books, went through, as I went through earlier, some extreme abuse.
And it's only going to get worse.
And so this genetic makeup, this past life that's flowing through him, has the propensity to leadership, but that leadership quality also has a propensity to narcissism, has a propensity to arrogance, has a propensity to aggression, has a propensity to distrustfulness, because you can't trust everybody and be a great leader, or you're going to get screwed. So all of these things that make a great leader can also be negative qualities. You have a propensity to that. How are you nurtured through the process? And so far, he's been nurtured through abuse, realistically.
So that's a good point, and that leads into right where I was going here on 96, bottom of 96 leading into 97, is so those qualities that can make you a good leader, but are also negative qualities, is a really good way to think about how this conversation with Moiraine and Egwene goes. So you and Sawan Sanche still think you know everything there is to know. You're both fools. Show some respect, Egwene growled, but Rand went right on over her words. The Tyrant High Lords know the prophecies too, and they know me. Once they saw the sword that cannot be touched clutched in my fist. Half of them expect me to bring them power or glory or both. The other half would as soon slip a knife in my back and try to forget the Dragon Reborn was ever in Tyr. That is how the nations will greet the Dragon Reborn, unless I quell them first, the same way I did the Tyrants. Do you know why I left Kalendor in Tyr? To remind them of me. Every day they know that it is there, driven into the heart of the stone, and they know I'll come back for it. That is what holds them to me. So he's not wrong. Moraine is being every bit as short-sighted as he is with some of his plans, in thinking, obviously she doesn't know what's happened to the tower, but in thinking the tower still rules the world, and all we have to do is have the Amarillan write letters to all the leaders of the nations saying that the attesting that the prophecies have been fulfilled, and this is the dragon, and everything's going to go smoothly. No, Moraine, no. And you've seen firsthand how your plans have been upended by the pattern, by the wheel. So you should know better. On the other hand, Rand is still being an a-hole in how he goes about pointing this out. So
this is for spoilers, so I got to make a note.
So one of the ways one of the reasons they butt heads and they can't just sit down and talk and share information and figure this out is because all three of the people in this conversation think they know best. And so they all have different sets of blinders on and different kinds of biases, but also similar types of personalities, those traits that do make them good leaders. I mean, Moraine was the leader of book one. Moraine is how they got out of the two rivers, how they made it to the eye of the world, how the dragon lived to start to realize that he's the dragon. So those traits were important to the world and to Rand, but some of those same traits are also why she is so arrogant.
I think at some point she lost connection with the difference between competence and conscientiousness. She saved the boys from the two rivers. She got them where they needed to be at the eye of the world and all of this. But that was actually through experience. Her plans were actually unwoven way back in the beginning of that when she couldn't just take them directly from the two rivers to the tower.
Yeah.
And she was able to get through those situations. And at this point, she still thinks she can cling to the plan. Whereas it was her personal experience and her abilities that got them through those first couple parts of the books. And then realistically, you take the growth of Perrin and Matt and to some degree Rand, but I'm actually going to give more of the credit to the other two at this point. And then the girls, Nynaeve in particular, with the perpetuation of the competence. Because she got them to a certain point, but if they didn't grow in that process, then they would be screwed by now because she didn't have a plan going forward. She still thinks she does.
Yeah.
Like you said, everything's going to work out if we can just do this. But it was the fact that the kids grew in that process and were able to pick up the slack of the plan not working, which is the note I made for spoilers because I can't mention what I want to say here yet. But
well, that is more ranting about the show. One of the many flaws of the show is that they never showed you that growth. One of the things we ranted about is why they could have taken 30 seconds because they showed Moraine taking Egwene aside and teaching her about the power. They couldn't take 30 seconds for while she was doing that, have Lan show that Lan is starting to teach them how to use their weapons so that we understand why they're competent later down the road.
Again, you don't want to plagiarize, but you could have taken this play from The Lord of the Rings when Boromir was teaching the hobbits how to use their weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Simple little scene. It was what, 30 seconds?
Yeah, if that.
If that.
But it sets up what's going to happen later. And I can't.
And it's something that's so universal. You know, the rules on plagiarism. If it's used in so many sources, you don't have to cite it, right?
Yeah.
And that would have been something that it's so universal that you could have thrown it in there without plagiarizing Lord of the Rings.
So speaking of giving credit, I can't remember this video I accidentally found the other day, and I didn't want to watch it, but I was bored, so I watched it. And it was on the
Alexis,
series
Texas takes Louisiana.
and why the series was terrible. And one of this guy's points that I thought was really good was that they screwed themselves from the beginning by wanting this whodunit, by wanting this mystery, because you can't ever tell the audience too much about these characters if you want to keep this mystery of which one of them is the dragon. So because Jordan never hid that, he never explicitly told you, you just kind of figured it out as you read because you knew who the main character was. But because he didn't want to hide it, he's able to tell you who these characters are. He's able to show you this is who Perrin is, and then we see the wolfness. He's able to show you this is who Matt is, and then we see his, descent into darkness because of the dagger, and Egwene and Nynaeve. We get to see who all these characters are, and thus see them grow. So that when we get to the end of the first book, let alone here where things really start to hit the fan, we can understand how these farmers from the backwoods are able to survive in this very dangerous world that they're woefully underprepared for at the very beginning of the story. Because by the end of the first book, they've had some preparation, they've had some growth, and we've seen it.
I have too many negative things to say about the series. So, by the
Yes.
way, if you are a Wheel of Time episode follower and not our other episodes, I did bring up in our last one, I watched a movie that was actually quite enjoyable. It was Uncharted. For those that have played the Drake's Uncharted video game series, I recommend as well. It wasn't a bad movie. I won't say it's completely along with the games, but it was a well done movie. I give it a B plus even. Of course, Tom Holland's always pretty good, and Mark Wahlberg's done some good work. But the only woke part of it was that the female bad guy was completely undefeatable in hand-to-hand combat, which we've all ranted about that. But other than that, that was the only woke part of the whole movie, and it was a big surprise when I was watching the credits that the showrunner was Rafe. And I was like, you could have done that with Wheel of Time. The shift from the game in Uncharted would have been acceptable from the shift from the book to adapt to the show series. The most hardcore of fans would still bitch and moan, but it doesn't matter what adaptation you do, they would have done that.
Yeah.
But all of us normies that just have read the books maybe 15 times would have still been at least like, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I might watch it again. That was kind of cool. What happened? Because he actually made that movie about the same time he made these shows. So it blows me away.
Well,
where the pressure was, it's got to be Amazon. The pressure was probably from Amazon.
If you go way back, I don't remember which one of the early episodes. It may have been in the very first review of the first 4 episodes. Because we did the episode where we gave our predictions that were terrifyingly spot on about how it was woke of time.
we were 100%.
But I think it was in that first review of episodes 1 through 4 where I had done some research and watched some other things and read some other things that there was a Me Too kind of thing that happened to a couple of the top guys at the head of Prime Video. And from what I've read and heard, it was one of those rather dubious Me Too's that is like, was this really? But because of that, those 2 were kicked out, and Amazon brought in this woman from Netflix specifically to clean up their image and give them a more female-friendly look. And one of the first things this woman did was Axe Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, you brought this up. Yeah.
Which was in pre-production, and it just boggles my mind because the dictate from Bezos to Prime Video when they started ramping up Wheel of Time and especially Rings of Power. That's what this is supposed to be. Is his edict was make me Game of Thrones. That's what he wanted. He wanted the views, the money, the cultural impact that would drive people to Prime the way Game of Thrones drove people to get HBO subscriptions.
Yeah, I don't pay for subscriptions as much as possible, and I bought HBO just to watch Game of Thrones because I watched the teaser of like the first 4 episodes, and I could not get off of it till the last season, and I
that made me sad. But just on a superficial level, I don't understand how you don't realize if you want Game of Thrones, then you are perfectly set up when you have the rights to frickin' Conan and have it in pre-production being done by the guys who were doing the show, the guys who were the showrunners had a good deal of control over how it was being done. And when this lady came in, she gave them the edict that they needed to soften it. They needed to make it more female friendly. Basically, they needed to make it more woke. They said, no, we are going to stick to the source material in both substance and tone, which means, sword and sorcery and boobies.
Which is funny because
and so they were axed.
All they needed to do to make it more female friendly was to have Chris Hemsworth as Conan. I mean, this is just an observation, but this push by certain movements to make things female friendly is to soften everything up.
Mm-hmm.
But we look at the numbers from box office to romance novels to whatever you want. Take Chris Hemsworth's shirt off, and not the last Marvel movie, but the ones before that, the actual Thor movies, and you get a better female turnout. You get Legends of the Fall Brad Pitt, and you get a better female turnout.
Yeah, we're not supposed to talk about that though.
Yeah, it's we're gonna bring in social media numbers here. Not social media, dating app numbers. Men, on average, will rate 50% of females acceptable to date and 50% unacceptable, which sucks for those 50% that are on the bottom half, and that seems like a big number. But women, when they judge men, will deem 20% of males acceptable to date and 80% unacceptable. That follows a direct Pareto distribution, which means female affection, physical affection or attention, is officially a resource because resources always follow a Pareto distribution. So, but it shows the judgmental nature of this and what actually attracts females. You put that thing that attracts females on the screen, you're going to get a better number than this touchy-feely stuff. Now, obviously, it goes best if they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
What was the show? Oh, gosh. The name is... It's the one that the girl goes back in time in Scotland.
Outlander?
Outlander, yes. That kind of was a very good blend of both. Because all the women were in love with Jamie, but at the same time, it showed an overly manly man, which I would call what we would say a little bit overly manly, a little bit backwoods type man, learning a little bit of subtlety. And so you got the best of both worlds, and that was very well done. So if you can put them both together, you're going to get better results. But if you had to choose between Captain Marvel and really sexy dudes doing heroic things, The girls are gonna go see the sexy dude doing heroic things.
I have not looked at these numbers, and now I'm curious to go see if I can find them. I would bet you dollars to donuts. That's probably not a good bet because I like donuts. I would
I
bet you
actually
that
don't like donuts.
more women watch the NFL than watch the WNBA. I am certain of that.
Oh, we can make millions if we put. Let's just find every feminist we can find on Twitter and put that bet down for $1. We'll probably be millionaires.
I'm certain of that. All right. So we need to push on because
We're only 100 pages into 900-page
we're
books.
only 100 pages in, less than 100 pages in, because we have to stop on page 98 because this is important.
Hey, but you know what? That means we can do it in 8 episodes, which would beat The Shadow Rising.
Hey, we're on a good track here.
Yeah.
Well, there's
That's not an end of a chapter. You want to?
no page 98. Look down at the bottom. This is important.
Okay.
You see what's down there? The italics.
Yeah.
This is the first time we see that. This is the first time we see a totally separate voice in Rand's head. It's in italics, so it jumps out at you. And even Rand notices he's had feelings. He's said things like the can breed. He's said things and done things before, but never has he had an actual voice. And it's not his voice. In his own head, he doesn't hear his voice. He hears another man's voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to point out and think about here because a lot of nerdy discussions and Wheel of Time theories, a lot of them will go back to or ask, when was the first time this voice showed up and what was going on? Because this is a big deal.
Well,
his
and it
mind
plays into
froze
what
for
I
an
was talking
instant.
about. About him. Loose Theron is coming out through him, and some of the things you found annoying in these first few chapters, were Loose Theron. They weren't Rand, and we don't have a grasp of that because we're just now being introduced to it. So this kind of stuff isn't my problem with Fires of Heaven. We'll probably get into more of my problems as things go because we've kind of already alluded to them a little bit, but
we get Rand's point of view that he's never met this, never heard of this woman, yet he can picture her perfectly in his mind. Not just see her, but kind of feel her, remember sensations about her. And this has to be the madness. So that's a big deal for Rand to know he's going to go mad and now suddenly think, oh crap, this is it. This is the beginning of the end. I'm going nuts.
And this is kind of crazy because I've been thinking a lot about this outside of Wheel of Time because we have echoes of the past within ourselves. A good example of that, and it's going to seem a little bit abstract, but I think it kind of leads in this direction. So if you're abused as a child, so say your father, you're someone who was unlucky enough to have a father that would rear up and slap you just out of nowhere every day. Anytime somebody picks up their hand to do their hair or anything like that, you're gonna flinch, right? So anytime,
I think a dog is a really good, if you've ever had a rescue dog.
Yeah. So anytime somebody raises their hand, you're gonna have a reaction to it. Now, echoes of previous lives. If your father was great, but his father did that, you would have that exact same trait. That anytime somebody raised their hand, you would flinch, even though it never, ever actually happened to you. So we have echoes of the past genetically. And when you see all of these things that kind of play forward genetically, and you kind of get a sense of how cultures picked up on these things, you can almost understand a belief in something like reincarnation because there's this thing that's unexplainable by your own life, but you can see it happening and you can see it from previous generations of yourself. So I don't know that we're getting metaphysical here because now we have these different magical and spiritual drives that are within this world, but you see echoes of it here in the real world as well. Your dreams, can you explain every dream? You've dreamed things that you can't even explain how you would experience something like that. So it's no wonder that these things would play forward in mythology.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, that's a good point, especially the dream part of it. And again, you've made me think that so much more during this reread of the importance of the world of dreams and how much that ties in, even when it's not direct. Even when it's not just like, obviously when you see the dreamers and people in the dream world doing things, oh well, that's obvious. But then when you start to think about the physics and metaphysics of how Jordan has built this world, how he's described this world, and the way dreams and the world of dreams weave through so many things, that it's more than just its own separate thing.
Well, and you look at I mean, and especially since he was so into Eastern philosophy, uh, the way Jordan plays some things into it. But I'm going to go into South American and Central American uh, shamanism. The way they describe the way they see the world, and of course they're on psychedelics at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's uncanny how close it is to actual quantum physics, where everything is connected and everything does play forward. I mean, realistically, you're going to see me here in a couple days. My atoms are only mine for right now. In fact, in the time it's taking me to say this, billions have already exchanged with other things in this room, right? What is the memory between those particles, between those uh, things that we can't even see yet because we don't even have the technology,
Well,
right?
you've talked about this before on a level that I think is actually even easier to visualize, which is on the cellular level, that your cells are constantly
Remodeling, yeah.
remodeling, you know, that this cell breaks away, gets recycled, new cells are made. So what is it? There's a number you told me that, like, after a certain amount of time, every cell in your body is new from,
Oh shit, yeah,
you
I
know,
did.
X amount of time earlier. So you are in essence a new person after X amount of time, because
Mm-hmm.
that's how long it takes for your entire body to recycle, to make new cells.
Yeah, I'm wanting to say a membrane cell, a cellular membrane cell is, or yeah, is something like 6 months.
That was the number that was in my head,
Yeah,
was
yeah,
6 months.
yeah, yeah. Because we were talking about nutrition,
Mhm.
and your cells are going to be made up of what you eat. So you are what you eat, realistically. I mean, the cliche is true. And so if you eat, such and such polyunsaturated fat versus saturated fats versus monosaturated fats versus this, well, your body's going to break those down and use them in your cell to remake these membranes because your membranes are mostly fat. And if it's a suboptimal version of it, well, you're kind of stuck with that for 6 months. So that one night of Taco Bell may be with you for longer than you actually think it is because you had
Mhm.
diarrhea for one day. You know, I mean, I still have my one night of Taco Bell, 2 or 3 times a year, but
Ah, it's so bad, and yet I want that that I want that Taco Bell binge every once in a while.
did I ever tell you about the unplanned Taco Bell binge?
No.
I stopped at the pub with a couple of friends for 2 drinks, and I actually kept it to 2 drinks. But it was back when they had that commercial where I'm trying to remember the product, but it was those little, they're like rolled up, kind of like taquitos, but they were a different
Mm-hmm.
name. And but the commercial was the Instagram boyfriend. and he was following his girlfriend around and taking pictures and taking pictures. Well, he had those little things in his pocket, and she's going, "Oh, sunset heart hands, sunset heart hands," and he's like eating, and she's like, "I said sunset heart hands," and he's got his camera and his taquito in his hand, and he's just torn. And I was like, okay, they got me with advertising. I'm gonna go get a few. So that was actually a good commercial. I appreciate it. So I went to Taco Bell, but the meal deal that came in, and I was like, I don't like it. Oh, but I can get them in a party pack. So I can
Oh
get
no.
12 soft tacos and 6 of these little chorito things. And you know what? I'll get soft tacos. Ben and I will share them tomorrow. We'll be good. So I got the party pack with the churritos in there. So it's 18 total objects. And I get home and I'm like, well, I'll watch a movie or watch a show while I'm
Those
eating
soft
these
tacos
things.
didn't make it to the next day, did they?
So what was I watching? I can't remember what show I was watching, but it was one I was kind of binging a little bit at them. So keep in mind, I had to work the next morning. And so at 9:30 at night, I turned on Netflix and I'm eating these things. 3 a.m, I look down and
Oh.
I've got tortilla and lettuce on my chest. My belly's out to here. And I look over and the box is empty. And I'm 4 episodes in and I'm like,
What happened?
oh, I just ate the whole thing. Now I need a drink. Oh, and I woke up the next morning and I felt miserable. And I was on the shitter like every 20 minutes. But gosh, they were good. Oh,
It's fun while it lasted.
It was fun while it lasted.
Taco Bell, the gonorrhea of fast food.
So I used to work at Taco Bell. I was a manager there.
Yep.
In my gain 80 pounds in 6 months days, which is actually a true story. And I swear a lot of the creative things on the menu were because the managers can eat free and you get bored, so you start just making shit up. Because we were experimenting all the time. But the meat is in a bag. You pull it out of the freezer in a bag, and it's got a big stamp on it. It says grade D. Grade D meat. And you put it in this hot water and
It's so
defrosts, and then you put it in there and scoop it out. And, oh yeah, so good.
That's what makes it.
I think it's time for spoilers, huh?
Yeah, yeah. That's we get a little bit of Matt stuff in the next chapter, and then some more Matt stuff in the chapters after that with the action that happens. So since we've been talking a lot about Rand there, let's stop there, and we'll push through more next time and focus a little more on Matt, because
no, I think we did good, because 100
Yeah.
pages at a time would get us through in about 8 or 9. Which again, Fires of Heaven took us what, 15 episodes? No, not Fires of Heaven.
Shadows.
Shadows, yeah.
Yeah. I think going by storyline rather than sequentially was one of those things that sounded good in theory. It really didn't work in practice.
Well, it was good and bad. What was bad about it is it prolonged it. It made us, it almost made us go too deeply into things. What's good about it is it made us go deeply into things.
Oh yeah.
Because we look at the Perrin and Zareen story, we dug into their relationship
And relationships in general, yeah.
like we were their relationship counselors. You know, it was which was very productive in some ways, but it did make it a forever trek.
We were doing our Dr. Phil impression.
Dr. Phil can kiss my ass, but
all right, well,
no, he's one of those guys that he'll have a great moment and then 10 stupid moments in a row.
Yeah. Let's pause a second and then we'll jump into the spoilers. All right, got myself an ice pack for my broken neck and ready to get into the spoilery stuff. Now you wrote something down. What did you have?
It was on page 96. You were talking about Moraine and her plan.
Yes.
And how all good plans are great till you get punched in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about that within the context of where we're at in the books. But my note was, this is why Matt is so important. because Matt is the guy that comes in and cleans up when plans go south, because he's the guy that doesn't care for plans.
He's the improvisational wizard.
Mm-hmm. And we're about to see that in this book, because they've got the best laid plans on their map, and he walks in and is like, not what I would do.
Well, but more than that is when he goes out there and kind of stumbles from encounter to encounter, he's improvising and improving their plan from where Couladin could have messed it up, right? So he's pushed that way by the pattern, because you're right. That is a great point, that he's Mr. Improv, and that's going to be important for Rand, for Moiraine, for Egwene, when she sends him off for her shenanigans. And I'd never thought of him that way before, but that is where because we've talked about how the three boys are complementary. Kind of they're kind of a Venn diagram where there's some overlap there, but then they have their own, archetypes and important characteristics, and that does kind of shift as they grow. So that is an interesting trait that Matt is going to take, and he's going to be that guy. And then when we get Perrin back, we're going to see that he is even more so Mr. All right, let's think this through. Let's plan this out. And let's do things right. Kind of guy.
And again, it's the left brain, right brain thing, where the cliche is forest for the trees or trees for the forest, right? And the left brain focuses on the trees, whereas the right brain can't help but just see the forest. And if you're too far one way, well, if you're too far right brained, then you're schizophrenic. If you're too far left brained, then you're OCD. It's this marrying of all that. And of course, in a story, you're going to see a slight caricatures, because it makes for a better story. But yeah, that's Moiraine is so far focused on the original plan that she's trying to fit the world to her plan versus fitting her plan to the world. And Matt's kind of the opposite, where, well, he's so far the opposite that he doesn't even care for a plan. He's just like, well, maybe we'll account for something, but let's just wing it. But yeah, that's the note I made on there. It's the balance of personalities.
Yeah, and we should get into that more next time, since we are going to get more into Matt and see a little bit of that while he's there in Rohedin.
In the spoilers, I did want to go into Rahvin a little bit, because we brought him up earlier.
Okay.
And it's spoilery because of the way he fights at the end of this book. But
well, I was curious where you were going to go with that, but we might want to wait for that for when we actually do get to the end of the book.
Okay, so let's just go over the backdrop of it, and then we'll talk about it in detail when we get to the final battle there, because the way he fights is just not what you would expect from what I'm about to read from our book of cheats here. He's a Forsaken. His name in the Age of Legends was Arid Mosinel. He doesn't have pronunciations in this book. His strength level was ++1. ++1 is the same as Rand and Ashamal. He is equally as strong as the strongest of the strong.
So he's even stronger than Sammy and Demandred.
Yeah, he's stronger than Sammy and Demandred. Dark and extremely handsome, with gray in his temples and dark eyes. He's taller than Rand and shoulders the width of Perrin's. So
big dude.
I did the math on that using BMI. So I did Rand and Perrin's BMI to kind of break things down, and then
is he Arnold size?
Reverse worked it. No, he's bigger than Arnold.
Oh wow,
he's bigger than Ronnie Coleman. He would be 6'8", 275 pounds.
Wow.
So he's a massive, massive dude.
So he's a genetic freak like Julius Peppers or something.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Uh, he's a little bit lighter, but he would be in stature kind of like the Mountain,
Mm,
but extremely handsome. So he's like a mountain-sized Tony Robbins.
wow.
He is what he would be. He's just this. I mean, when you look at the breakdown of him in his just his measurables, you wonder why he wasn't the lose there. You know,
He's a
because
genetic freak.
he's a genetic freak, but also uh, he was a master diplomat. He was a master manipulator. He was a master militarist. Uh, and then it goes on to what he did as Lord
Does
Gabriel.
does it does it say why he turned to the shadow? Because I can't remember if it ever says it in the
Love and
books.
power of glory.
Mm,
Love and power and glory. Uh, and you know, I did the Bill Clinton meme earlier. He kind of has that part to himself too. So he is a little bit distracted by the ladies to some degree, but
he does accumulate quite the harem here. Um, that is interesting though. We'll have to look at that more in detail when we get to the end of the book, because now that you mention it, the way he fights at the end is a little kind of more like how someone like Demandred is described in
well,
his
actually, I would even go a step further and say like someone like if Rand had encountered Moghedian,
mm, yeah,
who's who,
that was the other name I was thinking of.
yeah, who's so much weaker, but so needs this extra edge.
You know, laying traps and schemes and multiple contingencies and fallback plans.
Yeah, so someone with his strength and ability with the knowledge of the Age of Legends, even if he suspected that Asmodean was helping out, you look at the timelines, he's smart enough to know I can stand toe to toe with Rand and squash him.
Mm-hmm.
And but he doesn't. And so that's what that was kind of the thing that threw me for a loop. And I wish there would have been more in this book to tell you why, or less in this book to say that it shouldn't have been that way.
Well, I think there's enough even from the beginning of what we've covered here of explaining why Rahvin doesn't go after him. You know, so it makes sense that he would wait for Rand to come to him because you know, as Lanfear says in the prologue of you four are carving out places of power for yourself. That's why he went to the dark, was power and glory. So he's carving out his own sphere of influence, sphere of power, you know, where he can have, you know, glory and adulation and then all of these minions under him. But then also, you know, one of the things we kind of oh well, we were when we scoot along to Matt, but before we get there, Asmodine is Rand tells Asmodine to tell him about everything he knows about the Forsaken, and Rahvin has a queen for one of his pets, but your guess is as good as mine as to what country she rules for him. And so there you have uh his appetites getting in the way of, you know, as you point out, he's got all this knowledge and he's on an equal power level with Rand. Why doesn't he just go squash him? Well, because he wants the power, he wants the glory, and he wants his nice little, you know, harem and the prestige of having a queen as a plaything.
Well, we talk about the different strengths, and we know one of Ravin's strengths is compulsion, which is spirit, and he may not be great with just blowing shit up, right?
Mm.
So well, he does use the lightning later, but he may not be great at the straight on stuff. But why do the World of Dreams battle we saw instead of him trying to use compulsion on Rand or something along those
Or
lines,
on his close allies and
or on
have
his
his
close
own allies
allies?
attack him. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe his strength isn't straight on, even though his stature would imply that. But at the same time, he could have used his strength and the power with the things he loved in the power instead of this weird cat and mouse chase that we saw.
You might have just answered your question though, because I think by this point we're already told. I think this may have come up when Varen was explaining the World of Dreams to Egwene. There is a strong link between the World of Dreams and strength and spirit.
To get there. But we know from Perrin and Isam and all of these people who can't even wield the power that it's more of your inner.
But there is a link between spirit and the World of Dreams.
Well, which
So
brings us back to our
if,
metaphysical, that spirit might be the link of, you know.
but also that might be why Rahvin would pull the fight into the World of Dreams. If he's especially strong in spirit, then he might think, and he is a militarist, so he's choosing his battleground. And
But
I
at the
have
same
more
time, he doesn't
knowledge
use
and
the
I have the strength and
power
spirit.
in the World of Dreams all that much. He uses the World of Dreams from a mental standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, he's using the dream itself to attack Rand. But again, if he's very strong in spirit, that may contribute to his strength in the World of Dreams.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. Yeah. Yeah.
So that may give him an edge over that straight on fight if Rand is, say, more powerful in burning things down.
I like having to be able to think in a book, but the fact that we're way overthinking things and coming to that conclusion, that I think is a slight failing there. But but yeah, we wouldn't know it's a failing until we get the cheat book.
Well,
because I assumed up until I read that part of him, that Rahvin was an impressive physical character, but he was lesser to Samael and Demandred
and Demandred and Ishamael, because we are given more explicit terms of their strength compared to Lews Therin. So yeah, I too also assumed that he would have been below those four guys who are all talked about in kind of equal terms as far as strength and the power goes.
Yeah, when you read the measurables in this book, he's the baddest of the badass of them all. Now you've got the sub quality of a Ishamael where he was the philosopher and he understood the turnings of the wheel and all of that. But when it comes to just sheer, I'm going to assert my authority, Rahvin should have been the baddest of the bad. He should have been where Demandred is placed later, realistically. Bilal wasn't that weak either, but Bilal had his whole little honor system and everything, which they actually made explicit in the books, so you understood it. But
yeah, a combination of he needed Rand to grab the sword before he could take it, but he also was going to, fight a proper
he was Lews
duel.
Therin's sparring partner.
Yeah. He was going to fight a proper duel and prove that he could best Lews Therin one-on-one in a fair fight. That he was the better swordsman.
Where Rahvin, we don't get any hint of anything other than he's manipulating a whole country and he basically fights Rand in self-defense.
Well, we do get from that prologue that he has a rather Machiavellian mind as he's thinking through.
But every single one of the Forsaken does.
Yes. Very true. Very true.
You don't become a Forsaken without.
So he is thinking in terms of contingencies and advantage. So we need to keep an eye out if Rahvin pops up before the end anywhere to give us any hints on why the fight unfolds the way it does. So that's something to put a pin in and keep an eye on. The last thought I had is if you want to explore any more the voice of Lews Therin popping up here for the first time. This is something that's been talked about just ad nauseum in the Wheel of Time nerd community, because it becomes such a major component of Rand's character and things that happen to him through the next, chunk of books, really all the way till very nearly the end. And one of the curious things to me in rereading, the last few rereads, is that it really doesn't seem like anything happened here. It really does seem like Lews Therin's voice comes out of the blue. for the first time.
Let me reread that spot real quick.
That was on page 98. Because there was always this speculation of, well, first of all, is Luz Theron a construct or is it a real voice? Is it really Luz Theron? You know, the man, the personality from the previous age, or is this a construct of Rand's own mind? And so a lot of the talk was to try and kind of look at when the voice pops up and what's going on when it happens, because is there some kind of trigger? Is there some kind of trauma?
There is a trigger here. Because you brought up Egwene and why they butt heads. And Egwene and his interaction right before that is the trigger. And it's explicit in what he thinks about Iyenna. She never flashed her temper at me when she was angry with herself. And
you know, it may also be something you said, which is that part of the trigger may be Rand's own temper.
Because no, it's definitely an interplay. Definitely an interplay. You have to let the demons in, realistically. And when you have, we all have these voices in our head, and it's kind of an interplay of consciousness versus what's in reality, right? So our conscious brain interacting with the world, well, doesn't always sync. And when it doesn't sync, that feels like a voice in your head. And it's almost, sometimes it's getting you back on track, sometimes it's distracting you. And now again, we enter a metaphysical where there's a possibility of reincarnation and a veil between what we're talking about as maybe the world of dreams or some hub in between where there is a spirit element that comes back out. It's those lost moments of time where reality isn't syncing with your brain and it's coming through as a voice. Well, in this case, it could be your previous life, the thing that connects you to the wheel. Basically, you're a thread in the pattern, right? Well, that thread isn't necessarily a new one every time someone's born. It's a continuation of one when someone is born. It's like you tie a knot in a thread, and then a new thread comes out of that knot and then goes around. So
as opposed to the Norse idea or the Greek idea, or I don't know who else has this, you know, where this threads come from, where it's cut. When you're done, it's done. It's cut. I like that illusion, that idea of a knot rather than a cut when the life is ended, because there is reincarnation in this world, and so it does go on.
Yeah, it's still the same fibers. It's still the same fibers. It's just a new line to go through. I don't know. We'll keep going to that because it's.
Well, it's gonna keep coming up more and more as the voice pops up more and more.
Well, I'm thinking of because we were dealing with Tavern as well, and we know that Rand is Luz Theron reborn. Robert, since we're in spoiler section, Robert Jordan says in several occasions that Matt is probably King Aemon reborn.
The last king of Manetheren,
yeah. And Perrin, the third one, I think you're a wolf brother if you're a wolf reborn as a human.
Which I'd never considered before. I think that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I think you're a wolf brother if you're a wolf reborn as a human, because you're still a wolf in the dream. And so we've got this reincarnation kind of thing, and it's very prominent in the Tavern. You've got the wolf brother, and you could even speculate that Young Bull is probably the reincarnation of a pack leader of some esteem within the dream. And King Aemon obviously is huge, and Lews Therin is more obviously a huge reincarnation. So now what I would say is a little bit of a failure, especially since he did women so well, is we don't see any women reborn other than Brigitte later,
There
and
was
she's actually pulled out of the dream.
there was a lot of speculation from some things that are said that Matt is the reincarnation of Aemon and Egwene is the reincarnation of Aemon's wife, whose name I forget, the last queen of Manetheren.
Yeah, but that's just people trying to attach something because there's no book evidence of that.
No evidence of that specifically, but I
No,
can't.
no memories coming back like we see with Matt.
Oh, I think
No.
the main point of evidence is there are a couple of times where Egwene says something to the effect of she thought she could understand it, almost like when Matt speaks the old tongue. There are a couple of points in the Eye of the World when he's shouting out during the Trolloc fight, and then again when he's speaking the old tongue while he's being healed of the dagger. And Egwene says something to the effect of, I thought I could understand it, but I couldn't. I almost felt like I could understand it. So there that's circumstantial evidence that she is a soul reborn.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing, just not as strongly as Matt, and because of her strength in the power and her leadership, the speculation was, well, if Matt's Aemon reborn, then Egwene is the queen reborn.
Well, and the other circumstantial evidence I would say is the density of the power found in the two rivers, because there's obviously they actually talk about it in the books. We'll use modern terminology, but the genetic component to the power. You're more likely to be able to touch the power if you have parents that could touch the power. And so yeah, that's very possible that she's in a line straight down from that, if there is a line to begin with, right? Because it never even says if those two had kids. But again, being reborn, that takes away the I have to have a kid that does this. It could be just I am this soul that happened to be born at the exact time that this soul is coming back into the world.
Yeah.
We don't know we don't know if it has to be a lineage thing.
Yeah.
I would suspect that there's a lineage part of it because Rand is in line with the Andorran royalty as well as
Aiel bigwigs.
Aiel
Clan
bigwigs.
chief.
Yeah, the clan chief, which you wouldn't think that would be part of Lews Therin's lineage because Lews Therin was alive.
No, it's
when
more than that, because we see from his perspective when he goes through the crystal columns that Rand's line goes back to the leader of the Aiel when they fled in their caravan. I don't remember his name, but his ancestor was
what connection
leader.
would that have to Lews Therin though, as far as lineage?
That's a good point.
Yeah, there's no genetic lineage there, but the
Yes.
mother's side could very much have. Tigraine could very much have Lews Therin blood.
I don't know about that because he's called Kinslayer, and it's said that he slew all of his relations.
Yeah, that's true. So there is no blood connection with Lews Therin because he killed them all.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I've got. That was about an hour of rambling on the first 100 or so pages, and then half hour of rambling on spoilers, which I think is a good time frame. I think the episodes that I've thought we did best were when we kind of kept focused and kept within that time frame.
So this is it's 7:30 here, so this will probably come out tomorrow morning. So it'll be Friday. Now the next episode you're going to be here.
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to. You wanted to do a squat 101.
Yeah, I want to do some fitness stuff.
So we're gonna do some fitness stuff. I want to rant on some political stuff. And it just so happens we actually didn't do this on purpose, but we're going to do an episode together here at my house. And it's episode 100. It's our 100th episode.
Woohoo!
Because this will be 99. When you're listening to this will be episode 99. So we'll be together 100th episode, and we're going to do some fitness stuff. I want to rant on some stuff that is recent, socially and politically, and it's actually kind of dense, in topics. So if you follow all of that, we might do that in multiple parts, just to kind of, you can pick your poison, or watch it all. I might find a way to do timestamps or whatever. I've seen people do where you can put on YouTube, where you have different spots. You can click on a spot in the video and it goes to that spot. I'm gonna see if I can learn how to do that. But yeah, have you seen the stuff on Sam Harris on trigonometry?
No, I saw that he was on there, and I saw a title involving him, and I didn't see what it was.
Okay, so his clip, a clip from that is making the rounds. It is actually #1 trending in the UK on Twitter, and it is #7 in the US. So I would ask you, going into that, to not watch the clip,
Okay.
because I'm going to play it for you and we're going to react to it together.
Oh, what fun.
Yeah. Oh no, my reaction's already made, because for those that have watched, one of my modern philosophical intellectual heroes was Sam Harris. And I kind of want to fight him right now. So yeah, no. It's actually, I saw the headlines that came out of it, and I had it saved on my thing because I follow trigonometry anyways. And so I watched the full interview. So I looked at the headlines and I watched the full interview. And usually we've talked about it before. Clipping and clickbait. The clip is representative of the reality.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why I don't want you to watch it. Because if it wasn't representative, I would have you watch it and then we could discuss the full conversation. But no, I'm a little bit upset because someone who's exceptional when it comes to, or at least let me rephrase that, was exceptional when it comes to rationally dealing with moral and ethical. He basically has just ruined the whole atheist rational argument to morality in one episode of, and they challenged him and they did it respectfully, and then their response to it was very, it wasn't I love the Trigger guys because they truly are genuine. They were like, look, these are all the things we thought was wrong with that conversation, but here's how we roll. When we're talking with somebody, we let them talk.
Yeah.
And we're not going to make it a screaming debate the whole time we're there. And but they still did pipe up a lot while he was going. So it was if you do feel the urge, watch the whole clip, not just the little clips. But it was I'm disappointed in somebody.
Well, that's an interesting tease. So we'll see y'all then, and I'll get to find out with you, the viewer, what the heck he's talking about.
Oh, and I'm gonna try to get me a Bluetooth mic that goes right here, so that might make the squat thing work better.
That would be handy.
Than having this right here. Let's see if I can get it shipped within a day. So,
all right.
Amazon is awesome. Bezos sucks, but whatever.
We'll see y'all next time.
See y'all next time. We didn't give any advice. No disclaimers needed.